Welcome to Fashion Neurosis, Princess Julia.
Hello, Bella. I'm so happy to be here.
Can you tell me what you're wearing today and why you chose these particular clothes?
So today I'm wearing a brand called Service, and I'm wearing a dress from John Lawrence Sullivan. And you can't see it, but I've actually put my own belt over the top of the dress.
Because you're a DJ and a writer and you have such an incredible, distinctive look that's always evolving. And when was the first time you realised the power of clothes and how old were you?
Oh, 8 years old, actually, thinking about it. That's when my passion really sort of sped up, and I sort of had a sense of how I wanted to look. I remember begging my mother for my 8th birthday a smock top. I also wanted hot pants, and so this was about 1968, by the way. And I'd learnt how to knit as well. My grandma taught me. So I was busy knitting and crocheting, actually, and I remember making a little hat to wear. Oh my God.
Because you have always had such a distinctive style, and it sounds like you knew exactly what you wanted. It was like it was almost born into you, and you always you still have that. You know, you have this kind of incredible chic, and it's very elegant and sort of seems like almost historical. It's just so impressive. And who in your childhood did you admire for their style? How did your mum dress, and who's the Hungarian side? Is that your mother or your father?
My father was Hungarian and my mother from the UK. But really my style icon was my grandmother, who was an opera singer, and she was the flamboyant one. And I remember going to her closet and rifling through all her Dior New Look type dresses and sort of whipping them all out and trying on her hats and things. So I remember really being quite mesmerised by Julia Bowery. That was her name. And she was quite something. She's quite a curvaceous lady in her earlier years, and I have got an amazing photograph of her when she did sing opera in a sort of a very sort of Viking-esque type get-up. She was quite something, really, and I used to go and visit her on my own because she was just like amazing, really, and quite formidable, I must say. She had a very henpecked almost husband, although I think he just used to go off on his bicycle. They lived in Croydon.
All the best people, it seems.
So my mother was very, her idea of dressing was very functional. It's that old adage, isn't it, that everything sort of skips a generation. And then my father, he was a refugee. I think in his younger years, he had quite a sort of snappy way of dressing, but later on, he too was very sort of functional, really. But, you know, functional is a good look as far as I'm concerned. I like a functional look. I like a uniform. To me, it's all dressing up.
Yeah, it's the flip side of the same coin.
Yeah.
Yeah. And were you the only one? Do you have siblings?
I do. My sister, she likes to dress, but like she's not like me. She's got her own look. And she doesn't like to draw attention to herself, whereas I do. Sorry. Well, I do up to a point. You know, also, I sort of feel like dressing, makeup. It's almost like my shield in a way. It's a sort of reinvention of myself.
Yeah, because you've mentioned about being quite shy, and I've seen you look shy, and you have a demureness to you as well. And I wondered about your extrovert, introvert side, and if dressing up is like, you know, when you have coffee to calm you down when you're kind of overhyped, it's like pile it on and that creates a sort of neutrality.
When I left school, like about 16, I sort of entered a whole new world, and it was quite overwhelming, and I just wanted to have like lots of nice friends and places to go. The punk scene was sort of happening, and I really sort of found myself in that scene, but the women in that scene were a real inspiration to me. To me, punk was anti-fashion. It was sort of going against the sort of norms of beauty and how you could present yourself and create some sort of confrontation, because, you know, the mid-70s was a dangerous time if you're female. And so the role models that I was seeing and the people I was meeting really inspired me to take a leap into a way of presenting myself.
Punk was a game changer for me because it was the first time I'd experienced being young and sort of feeling insignificant as a kind of bit of agency, or just being young. And it's the first time I realised clothes were a real asset, that if you had good clothes, you had so much, you could project power that you never actually felt. And I always remember standing on the street trying to get a cab when I was 16 or 17. I was wearing bondage outfit because I'd been working in seditionaries.
Oh my God.
And then this woman just started screaming, and I hadn't done anything at all.
Wow.
And I thought, God, that's so amazing that I can be that scary. And it's just my clothes, even though I'm, you know, feel small. And do you remember that sort of moment of punk where you thought, God, this is something for me?
Yeah, I do. And I think even just going into seditionaries was quite a sort of feat, because it was quite a daunting shop, and you worked in there. I can't believe that.
It was so forbidding, the outside, and then you could only look through this door and see two or three of us sulking girls in the background looking down our noses.
Love that. I mean, I remember, like, with great trepidation, sort of mustering up the courage to go in there and sort of rifling through the rails, selecting various pieces of clothing and spending my hard-earned tips money.
What did you buy? Do you remember what you bought?
Yeah, I bought some bondage trousers, a T-shirt, a bondage top.
Which T-shirt?
I think it was the Cambridge Rapist, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, and at that time, for a very small amount of time, I worked in, after I did hairdressing, I was a hairdressing apprentice for a couple of years, and then for a very short amount of time, because I wasn't working, and I've got a great work ethic, I like to be busy, and I took this job in a factory, learning piecework, like sewing, basically, as a machinist, and which was very enlightening. But I really wanted to learn how to sew properly and quickly. So I went in there and learnt very quickly how to put a cuff on and a collar and things like that. So it's actually quite fascinating, and I love looking at clothes and seeing how they're sort of constructed. And I remember wearing like a little kilt to work in a factory just off Hackney Road, and the bondage top with the confrontational sloganage on, and nobody really batted an eye in the factory, but there were some quite odd looks on the bus to work, I must say. At that time, the doctors used to dish out antidepressants willy-nilly, so I had a good pocket full of those as well. So I was quite sort of spaced out, really. Not too bothered by what people thought that I was wearing, and the clothes really gave me a sort of superhuman feeling of confidence.
And where do you start with an outfit when you're getting ready?
I think about a sort of general silhouette, and I think about what the fabric's going to be. I have dreams about what I'm going to wear the next day, especially if I've got to go somewhere. But I'm inspired by people making things, so, you know, I might go to bed dreaming of one sort of look and then wake up thinking, oh, actually, that dress will work really well. And then sometimes I sort of take a few different pieces and then layer them up and sort of conjure up something a bit sort of newish. So I do have people coming up to me and go, God, you've got a different look on every time I see you. Never wear the same thing twice. But I do, actually. It's just that sometimes I wear things in different coordinations.
I've noticed with you that young people are really kind of appreciate all the experimenting that you do, and like your references, and that there's a lot of appreciation for what they can learn from you. One thing I particularly like about you is that when someone blows smoke up your ass, you're like, no, well, no, it's not like that actually. And I love that. You don't just take it because it's on offer. You seem to have a very kind of thing that I admire a lot, a moral compass about what's genuine. And I wondered, have you always been like that since you were a child?
Well, I think when I was a child, I was too frightened to say anything to anybody, quite frankly. But I mean, I'm one of those people that sometimes doesn't think before they speak. So I think that's probably a thing that I'm aware of and try to monitor. But sometimes everything just sort of comes out, or, yeah, I mean...
Well, it's good.
Yeah, sometimes I do make a few faux pas, I think. But I don't mean to upset people, but also I'm very interested in sort of seeing other people's point of view of things, and I'm not afraid to admit that I'm wrong either. I think that's quite important, or, you know, to take somebody else's opinion on board. And that goes for like all sorts of things as you go through life, really. You know, I'm nearly 65 now, and I never really thought that I would still be sort of knocking around, quite frankly. So that's quite entertaining. And I don't really see it ever ending. I don't really see that there's a sort of cut-off date, because I'm still really enjoying myself and enjoying all these different facets and interests and entertaining moments that seem to engage me. And I think they're things that sort of keep me going, really. And the people that I meet younger, older, my own age, continually inspire me, quite frankly. And also, like, people that I've known for a long, long time, their sort of experiences and how they deal with their life changes really do inspire me. I do meet people that their families have abandoned them and they've had to run away and they've had to find themselves somewhere else and they don't have the support of their families. I hope that, our club family are there in a big capacity to support people. And I work in a lot of different sort of club areas as a DJ. They are a point for people to meet and make new friends and swap ideas and create new things, which I think is so important. So I want to be able to impart my knowledge and support to younger people because clubbing on the whole is, a younger space for people to exist in. But I do see that a lot of spaces that I work in are very intergenerational.
Where does your name, Princess Julia, come from? I'm sure you're asked this all the time, but did you create that for yourself or did someone start revering you as that?
Do you know what? I think basically because I was so shy, I was sort of quite sort of reticent at sort of speaking. So I guess I could be quite sort of standoffish. I worked as a cashier lady in the WAG Club and I remember one of the managers there always used to call me Princess. So I guess there's a bit of that there. And then people sort of going, God, who do you think you are, sort of idea. And I'm like, I'm just me. Anyway, so a bit later on in that decade of the 80s, I was DJing regularly by then at a club over in Brixton, the Daisy Chain, and we thought, us the DJs, that we should have proper DJ names rather than our own names, because I think it was all the rage. I became Princess Julia. It was
So
sort of about
good.
1986. But then also I had this sort of idea that, you didn't have to be born into the upper echelon to be have a royal title, so to speak. So, because I thought that was really quite unfair, actually. Why do some people get to be lords and ladies and, us on the lower rung? We can have airs and graces too. So that's my sort of way of thinking. So it was quite a sort of quite a statement, really.
Sort of almost like, the nicknames at home. My dad was always big on nicknames, and then I invented my name, not that I really called myself that, as Belonius the Great. And that was my alter ego.
I love that.
As a kind of warrior. And then I love
How old were you when you did that?
Probably 11.
Okay.
I think that's when I started being very interested in superhuman qualities, feeling sort of unhurtable, I suppose. I wanted to be invincible. Belonius the Great sounded good. I always admired Alexander the Great because instead of kind of pondering over something, he'd slice through the knot. And I thought, I'd love to be like that. I'd love to not be hesitant and doubtful. I'd love to know that the way to undo this knot is to slice through it with a sword. It just seemed brilliant, but it's taken me most of my life to be more connected to my decisive kind of attributes, and now I'm quite decisive. And I also loved how like the way names come about. Judy Blame, when he worked for Anthony Price, and his name was Christopher Barnes, I think, and Anthony would say, "Oh, blame Judy," and then he just ended up as Judy Blame, and it suited him so well. And Princess Julia suits you. You do have you have innate elegance and class.
I mean, I just hated my own surname because I was so ridiculed at school anyway. And then I do remember when I was much younger, making up a name. I can't remember the name though, but I do remember doing that and like signing it. Did you do that as well? Like trying out the autograph?
I used to write to my sister and sign off Valonius the Great. Sometimes I still do.
That's so cute. I love that. Oh, that's so nice. Oh.
You've also talked about how much you appreciate the identity of non-binary, and I wondered what that means to you.
I sort of feel like, it's something that our scene was doing in the late 70s at the Blitz, New Romantic nightclub era times. There wasn't a definition or a way of defining being non-binary, and I'm pretty sure that if I was 18 now, I'd be non-binary. And I just feel like we live in a society that's been so brainwashed into this definition of you've got to be one thing or the other, and it doesn't allow for nature.
Yeah, that's a very good way of putting it, actually.
How fluid nature is, and everything isn't cut and dry like that. And I feel like society likes to keep people in their place and regimented to keep some sort of weird way of controlling the general public. Do you get my gist?
Yeah. I suppose if you think of just in terms of, everything is so connected to selling things to people that if you don't really know what they're supposed to be, who are you targeting? But there's so much scope within that. And I suppose there's a lot of fun to be had with playing around with your identity.
Yeah.
In a way, I suppose, like, the punk scene for me was that.
Yeah, it was really non-binary.
Yeah, and also what I liked was that you could be, not that I was, but you could sort of wear very little, or you could wear this kind of bondagey type of clothes, but it wasn't sexualized like you talked about in the 70s, it being more of a dangerous time when you're a young person, and especially a young woman or girl or whatever, that everything was so hypersexualized, and it made you very vulnerable. And then punk was just, it just did away with that in a way, and that was quite freeing. Were you friends with Lee Bowery?
I was friends with Lee Bowery, actually, yeah. I first met Lee when they kind of arrived in the UK, in Clubland, and made friends with Lee almost immediately. They were very impressive. Lee and Trojan.
Yeah.
Obviously, they were sort of like a duo. I think when Lee first arrived, he had the intention of being a fashion designer and following quite a traditional route, and creating collections, seasonal collections, and quite quickly realised that wasn't really the trajectory.
Yeah, he seemed to realise that he was the creation, and he did that so brilliantly. I mean, he was so funny as well, Lee, and it was, I think, one of the most exciting moments in my life was going to a club and being greeted by Lee, because he had the way he spoke. He kind of he would just sort of talk to you almost as though he was at the WI, like, oh, hello, you know, just sort of very matter of fact. No, and you were being greeted by this. I mean, he was so gigantic. He'd wear those, you know, massive built-up shoes, and he was already over 6 foot. And so this amazing creature would bend down and grace you with a kiss on the cheek, and oh my God, it was just like being greeted by God. It was so fantastic.
I always sort of think the turning point for Lee was when Lorcan O'Neill had Lee perform in the Dauphin Gallery.
Yeah, I remember that.
That really gave Lee serious leverage into the art world and really made people sort of stop and consider what Lee was all about, actually. And you went to that, I went to that too. And I remember thinking, wow, this is really quite a moment.
Yeah, it was so interesting, even though he wasn't doing much. He just, everything was interesting. And I suppose I got to know him when he was sitting for my father, and my father did these incredible paintings of him, and I used to go around and we'd go out for lunch or breakfast or something, and he had a kind of off-duty look that was really good, and he'd sort of be in, like, you know, some slobbish type of track pants or something, and then he had this amazing wig that was like a prodigy child's, like with this sort of muted blonde curls, like you would imagine someone's sort of 7-year-old that they were grooming for being a concert pianist or something. And he had such, you know, these blue eyes, and he had so much charm, and then just he was so hungry for culture, and we'd go to restaurants and he'd be really interested in the food and how it was made, and developed all these tastes, and he was just so wonderful.
He loved sitting for Lucian.
They really got on well. They were just sort of made for each other.
Yeah. Who's got the cloth, you know, because Lee stole loads of pieces of canvas and made it into like a shawl.
Oh yeah, he took the rags.
He took the rags, right?
Used to clean his brushes.
Yeah, and it does exist somewhere.
Yeah.
And maybe it'll be in that show at the Tate that's coming up, right?
Yeah, in February there's a big show at the Tate, isn't there? Which I can't wait to see that.
I think maybe Lorcan's got it, but I'm pretty sure that'll be in it. It's got to be in it, hasn't it? Because, I mean, that shawl really is sort of like a signifier of that chapter of Lee's life, I feel.
He just took it and made some, you know, the next phase of his career out of it, which was then cut short by his death. But I'll never forget. I never saw my father cry, but when Lee died, he cried, and I can still feel the pain. It was just so,
I never knew that.
Yeah, it was a real, they were really kind of they were great friends, and Lee had a huge effect on my father and on everyone really. So it will be really exciting to see the show. I can't wait for that. You play music for a living, and I wondered if you ever, what's like the most unexpected music that you might listen to?
My tastes are really wide, and I just love listening to all kinds of music, quite frankly. So, you know, I do listen to classical music on occasion, and then and I even have friends that sing classical music, actually, so that's really exciting. And then I'll delve into the camp realms of musical theatre. There's nothing I like more than a show tune. And then, you know, regarding club music and DJing, I'm lucky enough to be able to get away with playing quite a sort of eclectic mix of music on occasion. And my heart is lying in the realms of like electronic music.
Really?
I don't know why I love it, yeah. And so that is a really wide scope of music to listen to. It can go from ambient into classical, into camp, into post-punk, electronica, into all sorts of realms.
I suppose it's finding music that appeases a different part of your soul than I know I love, like Lizzo, Boys, or Britney, you know. I just love that stuff. And then
I mean, I love a bit of pop, and I like to keep quite up to date with the sort of latest sort of pop stars going on, and I think there's some really brilliant ones, and there's some really brilliant performers.
Who do you love at the moment?
I'm obsessed with things that sort of go viral, because like, I think to like make a hook and make it an earworm.
Is that what it's called?
I think that's a real talent.
Yeah.
Like, how do you know, like if you get a hook like that, and the right singer with the right production and the right moment, like I think that's just like quite beyond how a little hook can like engulf a whole nation of people.
Yeah. Did you like, I had that really intensely, and it's still going on with Charlie XCX and Billie Eilish, Guess.
Yeah, it's so good, isn't it?
It just makes me feel so happy and so wild, and I play it in the kitchen in the morning, and if I'm having a downer and I put that on, I just feel like someone's giving me a mission, like Alexander the Great, like I can cut through the knot. I just need this running through my bloodstream.
Yeah, it's so beyond.
Yeah. Before you arrived, I was watching the video of Fade to Grey that you did in 1980, and Steve Strange's legendary video, and it was so amazing, and I hadn't realised at first that it was you, and it was such a good song, and I remember Steve Strange, and I remember going to a club night of his called Bangs in Tottenham Court Road. That was before the Blitz, I think.
So Bangs wasn't actually Steve's club, but I used to go to Bangs with Steve Strange, funnily enough, as well. So maybe we were double dating.
I remember it was
That's so funny.
I think I only went once or twice, but because it was when I was working at Seditionary, so I was about 16 or 17, and I remember what I was wearing, and I was wearing this micro mini dress and fishnet tights and these really high shoes, and my feet got so hot that I poured my half pint of cider over them.
Oh my God. I love that. Oh,
trying to cool down. But Steve was pretty kind of haughty, and he definitely embraced his status. And so,
did you meet him in the sort of punk era?
Yeah.
So that's when I saw him around in the punk era.
Yeah.
And I had a friend, Vi, and we always used to be so fascinated of how he could always be dressed in head to foot dictionaries, and how he could afford it, because it wasn't actually really cheap or anything.
No, it was really expensive.
It was a definite statement, and right down to the pixie boots, and we were always really fascinated, and we could never work it out. And somebody said that he used to sell speed. Is that true?
I don't know, but that wouldn't surprise me. I mean, do you write every day?
No.
Because there's a lot of conjecture about inspiration, which seems the least important thing. Because if you waited for that, you could be waiting forever. But there's something about doing something when you're not in the mood and finding a way to do it, which that's inspiring. And all the writers...
How do you do it, Bella?
I think of a first line. I think vaguely, I don't know what to do. And then I think of a first line that if I read that, I'd carry on reading. And then I've hooked myself back in. I've sort of got myself interested. And I know that if I write something, I've got something to shape. And the worst thing is that if I don't write anything, or I try to make it perfect before it comes out, then it never comes out. But so the best bit of advice I got from my ex-husband, who's a writer, he said, just get it down on the page. So I know that sometimes it's just the act of, however you write, putting on the computer, getting the Word doc up, and then just something comes out, and then there's something.
Do you apply the same sort of rules to when you're creating clothes?
Yeah. I read this book actually about how to further an idea, and it's written by this man, George Saunders, and it's called A Swim in the Pond in the Rain, or something very similar. And he uses examples of Russian short stories written by Chekhov and Tolstoy and Turgenev, and he breaks down why the writer has left things in and what he's taken out. And when I read that, I thought, I know how to do that when I'm designing. What do I add? What do I take? Instead of... I found it incredibly useful, and I find that it all interrelates, and that the act of making something will make something else happen, and that's what makes life worth living for. Really, it's kind of
to find some kind of joy, and fulfillment in whatever task you undertake.
Yeah. And also, like you were describing about the club community and friends and, abandonment, to look out for other people and, care for each other. That's a very kind of stimulating thing in itself. And I wanted to ask you, if you fancy someone and you don't like what they're wearing, does it kill your attraction to them?
Yes. Yeah, it would make a difference, I feel. I know it sounds vacuous.
I don't think so.
I do think the art of dressing is a reflection of your inner spirit.
It sounds like vanity or prejudice, but it's a message, isn't it? It's, can I go beyond it, and does it matter? Or it's a kind of warning, really, like this. We're not supposed to be with each other, because this kind of vital strand of communication is missing.
Have you ever been with someone where you thought, I can overlook that actually, and then sort of not try to change a person, obviously, but sort of like suggest that they maybe try on a different look?
Yes, I can think of one person.
And was it successful?
Not really, because in the end they didn't want to be different from how they were, but the way they dressed was so bad. And it wasn't like clumsy bad, it was really, there was a lot of love gone into these hideous clothes and earrings and just shockers. And so I tried to change him. And of course that, no one wants to be changed.
No, but obviously inside, the person must have been a lovely person. There must have been something about them that,
I don't know,
that you adored.
In a way, I think
or did it just, in the end, it overrode everything?
It wasn't just that, but it was definitely a warning, and it was a sign to me. But I needed to do that, and I did, and ultimately you
learnt something out of it, though.
Yeah, I did.
That's what I love. Everything's like a learning curve, and I'm still learning, and I just never want to stop learning. I always want to be finding out about things, different ways of putting things together, making new things. I'm not one of those people that I've seen it all before. I'm not going to be one of those people. I'm not one of those people. Actually, I have called myself saying that in an ironic fashion. But I want to be on the up of going forward.
I think you are. You're a modern woman, and that's why you have such an appeal, because people do project their nostalgia on, and I've heard you just don't go along with that, and you seem,
I like the trad with the rad.
I love that. Oh, that's great. Well, thank you so much, Princess Julia, for being on Fashion Neurosis. It's been illuminating and wonderful to have you here.
I've loved it. I'm so thrilled. I am.